Hello, this is Pam Petersen-Frey. This is my interpersonal communications project for Liberty University HSCO 508, and this is spring 2017. HSCO 508 is a course about interpersonal communications, and we were called on to engage in a series of self-reflections and self-evaluation in order to improve our communication styles. We kept journals to record the reflections that we made during the course, and we want to become more responsive and more effective as communicators. So we broke this down into a series of analyses and bullet points for improvement. We started with the definition for interpersonal communication, and that happens when two people are involved in talk and they listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. That's from Stewart. One of our textbooks is by John Stewart. The talking and listening, sending and receiving, giving off cues and taking them in can be thought of as inhaling and exhaling. This is a really nice image to concentrate on it during conversation. That it's not all inhaling, it's not all exhaling. That you need to pace yourself and be thinking about the needs of the other person and the needs of the other person to have time to actually express his whole thoughts. My overarching goal is to learn to listen as a Christian. That means cultivating through a series of self-reflections and, of course, the intercession of the Holy Spirit to cultivate a spirit of kindness and humility. And that way it will allow me to talk less and listen more, and especially to listen in a loving, diligent, and with a patient heart. Now, how do I turn a changed heart into actions? Well, by becoming aware of my listening patterns. And that means, again, cultivating through self-reflection how to become non-judgmental and more empathetic. I want to acknowledge the person I'm talking to and respond in a way that enlarges the communication and invites him to communicate without restriction and without feelings of intimidation. My overarching goal is to listen as a Christian. My background in behavioral blend is, in the Uniquely You profile, they gave me the personality of DS description on graph 1. And that was steady and strong-willed. Others seeing me as a cheerleader type. And in parentheses it said talking too much. Well, that was exactly right. I thought that evaluation was exactly me. I felt that it was accurate, and I immediately embraced the goal of talking less and listening more. And predictably, retraining yourself is not that easy to do. In graph 1, my blend was DS, and they said that my personality was both dominant and submissive. However that works, I don't know. But anyway, that I can lead if I have to, but I can also follow and work in the background if I need to. So maybe that's okay. And so what other people expect of me is to be a steady doer, and they think I'm flexible, which I think I am, but that I'm confusing. And I don't know exactly what that means, but maybe it's the dichotomy of the two really polar different kinds of personalities in one. One side as leadership and one side as a follower. But maybe those are two things that can work together during conversation to make the interchange go more smoothly. I tend to be direct and assertive. On the plus side, these are my own evaluations. I'm patient and compassionate. I'm steady, forward, and I'm usually pretty clear. On the minus side, I'm too anxious to talk, and my concentration is really weak. When I encounter sadness in other people, it turns me right into a cheerleader. I think that it's my goal to bring them out of that sadness, and I do that almost like with a button push. I do it automatically. I'm an American female, born in 1953. I'm the eldest of 5 siblings, which may be where I get the leadership ability. I'm very determined, but I'm willing to follow. I'm willing to follow directions, absolutely. And I kind of have a take charge personality in an emergency. If there's ever an emergency, I feel it's my role to take possession of that and make things work out. So, for communication barriers, I think that the cheerleading is a barrier. I realized during the introspection during this course, that being a cheerleader also means taking control, and it means taking total control. When you cheer, you're just doing it, nobody's doing anything but you. You're just cheering. And I realized that that's sort of a defensive mechanism in a way for me. Not only do I want to cheer up the other person, but I actually want to stop. I think subconsciously I want to stop unpleasant kind of exchange. So this is definitely something that I'm going to have to learn to control and maybe modify into a mini cheerleader personality. I am very formal. I have a high sense of formality, but I do tend to lose focus. I think my mind is rushing. In efficiency, my mind is rushing to try to organize and do other things, and I think I lose concentration because of it. And then the other thing that I would say is a barrier is that I have a tendency to let the conversation go anywhere. I never really thought much about it until I took this course, and I realized that no, it's really my job to have some sense of control of where this conversation is going, to lead, not control, but to lead the conversation. So I want to have goals and structures in my mind as I encounter a client and work with them. Listening as managing as a positive, supportive move, but one that listens and guides rather than manipulates. I read this by an author named Purdy, and I thought that was a nice way to think of being in control of the conversation. There's another thing called CQ, contact quotient, and I liked that. That was something that Stewart talked about in our textbook, and that has to do with how much potential there is. If you sort of can imagine the total potential of a relationship or a conversation, and then imagine how much of that you're actually accomplishing. How much are you able to engage from the potential? So it makes a sort of ratio that you can visualize and imagine how you're doing in your exchange with the other person. This is called contact quotient, and I liked it a lot. This measure relates the depth at which you're connecting with someone in conversation compared with the communication depth that's possible. Okay, so my action plan is I have 12 steps for my action plan. I want to deliberately practice the virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. And I think that's just a kind of basic way to ready your mind for how to operate as a nice conversation partner and as a good Christian, to keep these things under control and to practice them until they're natural and you don't have to think about it anymore. That becomes actually a natural part of you. I want to also make sure that, especially before a complicated or stressful encounter or conversation, I want to be sure that I stop and invite the Holy Spirit to guide me and lead me and make sure that He's in control. 3, I want to concentrate on the dignity of the other person. I think this is extremely important. No matter what kind of problem that person may be having, no matter what kind of difficult situations they've even put themselves in, I want to make sure that I'm always concentrating on their dignity. I want to listen with love and remember all the time that God commanded us to love, and that love is a decision. You decide that you're going to love that person, and you do. I want to exercise control in listening, and sort of learn to organize my thoughts as I listen, so that I can replay it for myself instead of just letting it go in and go out, but actually make some kind of order for myself as I'm listening. Another thing I learned in this course is that it's important to reflect on how I feel before I go into a session or conversation. How I feel might have influence on how I respond and how I talk or explain to another person. So that's important, and I'd never really given it much thought before. Another thing Burley Allen said was to listen to the underlying meaning. I like that too, because it seems sort of natural, but you do have to pay attention. Sometimes when people are talking, especially I work with teenagers, and especially teenagers, they don't always exactly say what they're trying to get across. And it takes a little digging or a little thought. Maybe you have to ask some extra questions to get at the underlying meaning. Another thing that I think as an American, we're very competitive in conversation. And I want to be sure that I sort of eliminate or guard against this competitive nature that I'm sure I have. It's almost like I was trained on the debate team or something. And I really want to make sure that that's not obnoxious. You know what I mean? I want to check my emotions, and I like the flat brain theory, and I like the idea that your emotions do flatten your thoughts, flatten your brain, and decrease your ability to reason. I want to be aware of that and make sure that my emotions are under control. I like what Stuart said about practicing nexting. In other words, to try to be in control of, I hate that word control, but try to be mindful of what's going to happen next. Because one of my difficulties that I pointed out earlier were that I tend to just let the conversation go anywhere it wants to. And I need to be in mindful control of where we're going next with this, and not just let the thing ramble. I want to, and the end of that is to visualize a conversational goal. The last thing on my little 12-point list is using the image of ratio. And I like that. It's another visual image that I can have. I think of sharing myself in divisible parts, not just exploding everything all at once, and also drawing out from people in divisible parts so that I can kind of keep control of what's going on in my own head, and in that way organize my thoughts. My purpose in life is to love and serve God. That's the purpose we have as Christians. And I know that forming perfect habits is not easy, but it's definitely doable with help of the Holy Spirit and God's grace. I do have a determination to improve myself and to learn the Christian virtues that would please God. My closing thoughts are that this course made me aware of some things that I had never thought about before in conversation, and how to give and how to receive, and how to inhale and exhale, how to be conscious of when it's the next person's turn, how to be conscious of organizing my thoughts, and how to be conscious of loving with dignity the person that I'm engaged with. Thanks.